Okay, hello. Today is February the 11th, 2023, and we'll talk about two architects, both connected with this day, February the 11th. But one died on February the 11th, and the other one was born on February the 11th. We'll begin with the one who died on February 11th, and that is Walter Burley Griffin. Very good architect from the United States. So, Walter Burley Griffin, born on November 24th, 1876, and died on February 11th, 1937, was an American architect and landscape architect. He is noted for designing Canberra, Australia capital city, and Griffith, New South Wales. He has been credited with the development of the L-shaped floor plan, the carport, and the innovative use of reinforced concrete. But this doesn't tell the whole story about him. Influenced by the Chicago-based Prairie School, Griffin developed a unique modern style. He worked in partnership with his wife, Marion Mahoney Griffin. In 28 years, they designed over 350 buildings, landscape and urban design projects, as well as designing construction materials, interiors, furniture, and other household items. About Marion Mahoney Griffin, we'll talk more on Tuesday because it will be her birthday. This was the man, Walter Burley Griffin. And is not so well known, at least where we are now, but I think he deserves to be known. Here he is with his wife. If I'm not mistaken, the first lady architect or woman architect who received a license in architecture in the United States, Marion Mahoney Griffin. Very talented architect herself. Here is the cover of a book, I guess, Grand Obsessions, the life and work of Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin. They met in the office of Frank Lloyd Wright, where they both worked. They fell in love, and then, they started on their own an architecture practice. They won the competition for Canberra to design the new state capital and so on. I begin with this project, which unfortunately didn't come to fruition. It was not built, and they moved to Australia exactly because of this. But something happened there. It didn't come through. This was their plan with which they won a competition, the federal capital of Australia, Canberra, and they designed this plan. They won the competition, they moved to Australia, but there something happened, and the big plan didn't go through. It was not implemented, but they built a lot in Australia, and we are going to see some of their buildings there. They also built a little bit in the United States. Now I start with and unfortunately I misspelled the incinerator. Is the first A should be E, letter E. So please read it like this: incinerators. After N is an E. Incinerators, which are industrial buildings. But I have to confess, this is in a way a tentative presentation of this architect. I need to develop this presentation, but you'll have an image about him and about his works, imperfect as it is sketched by me in this presentation. I was and I am very interested in this particular work that he did, these incinerators in Australia, because I think he transformed, potentially, a rather prosaic kind of building, an industrial building, into something very, very different. And you'll probably agree with me after you see some images. of these incinerators. For example, this is one of them, and he emphasized the power of fire. These big chimneys, which are needed in an incinerator, of course, the way he expresses their architecture goes beyond the limits of industrial architecture. In fact, if you look at this building, you wouldn't call it an industrial building. But he has a large variety. I didn't count them, but I think he built almost 20 incinerators. Some of them were demolished, but others are still standing. Very interesting works. So interesting that I like fire, and in its mythical, symbolic, metaphorical, substance or essence, and an incinerator works with fire. Now, as I said, my presentation is a little bit deficient because the works are not shown chronologically, and I apologize for it. But I hope to make some sense of what I have here. Now, he built also the Newman College. We'll come back to incinerators a little bit later. He was an apprentice, an architect working for Frank Lloyd Wright, but his architecture is distinctly his. And I would say that this building is not a bad building. The college in Australia, very different from Frank Lloyd Wright. Although some influences can be seen, and I will end this presentation with the house he built in Evanston, a place where I lived for 5 years, and I passed by on my bicycle that building many times without knowing that it was built by Griffin. The incinerator in the suburb of Brompton, South Australia, known by the name of the adjacent suburb, Hindmarsh. It's a little bit difficult for me to identify buildings with a certain location in Australia because they have I would say for me, a peculiar way of naming, a certain building relating to a location, as it is the case here. Another incinerator, which has dignity as architecture. Its function is industrial, but I am sorry, this could have been many things. I don't know if it's still used as an incinerator, maybe not. He brought to this function a monumentality that is intrinsic to architecture, but not so, in this way, not so present in the field of, industrial processes and so on. The incinerator in the suburb of Evanston, South Australia, it's informed by history. You look at these columns in the corners of the prisms, and maybe the charm, in a way, of these buildings derives exactly from the fact that you wouldn't expect an industrial building to look this way. It's animated by a spirit which is not really related to industry, to industrial processes, machineries, and so on. This could have been a city hall, or I don't know, even a religious building of some sort. Now we are back to the college that I showed before. Sorry again for overlapping all kinds of images, not in the best order, but you are probably one of the very few people in Romania who know now about the name Griffin, because he is not a well-known architect, although he deserves to be known. And I even read last night an article about him. He was called the genius of Walter Burley Griffin. Now, I don't know if this rendering belongs to him or to his wife. They probably work very well together, and it's too bad that he died rather young. I think he died at 60, which for an architect is not enough. Usually architects live longer, but fate is as it is, or as she is, capricious. Some people live longer, some people less. He died in India, actually, where he was going to build a library in India. And I don't know if he built it. I never saw pictures of it. But I like this college from what I see. And he used a lot of stone. Cafe Australia, this is an urban building, probably in Sydney. There are some echoes a little bit from Frank Lloyd Wright, but there are many other things happening here. You know, there are historicist elements. I might even see some echoes somehow, a little bit maybe from Louis Sullivan. He is different from Frank Lloyd Wright. He is not like this building, which is also, I think this is the cafe, and it is, I'm a little bit confused. I think it is the cafe. I'm not sure because I see the ceiling inside the space here being different from here. But this building, because I did once myself a project for, well, not for Australia, for New Zealand, or was it for Australia anyway? The Aboriginal, the architecture of the Aboriginal indigenous people, they have houses very much like the front elevation of this building. So it's possible he was influenced also by the local architecture, the indigenous architecture, the local people before the arrival of the British, and so on. And I like this building. It has character, it has solidity, is animated maybe by Art Deco elements, but also by the usage of these big stones, which was not so used by well, Frank Lloyd Wright used some stones, like in the Falling Water building, but informally, so to speak, not like this, building a vertical wall with stones. It would be interesting, actually, to create some parallel between Frank Lloyd Wright and Walter Burley Griffin. Monumental, sculptural. I understood that both him and his wife loved nature and worked extensively also in landscape design. We see here also the relationship between the building and nature, rather enhancing each other dramatically. Walter Burley Griffin. Now another incinerator from 1935. Look at this. I mean, when I first saw it, and actually I discovered it today, I was almost shocked. I mean, this kind of elevation for an industrial building. But then there is Hundertwasser in Vienna, in Austria, who built otherworldly incinerator himself. So maybe some incinerators, although I looked on Google Images today, I just typed in incinerators and I couldn't find great architecture. I found, imposing industrial buildings, but not with the touch of the architect like we see here, but rather surprising architect if we look at that giant ornament in the center, because that's what it is. It is an ornament. Unless there is some kind of a cylinder there, horizontal at the level of that rotated square. But all in all, it's a giant. It's an emblem. It's an emblem. The facade of the building became an emblem, and I find it very interesting. Also, to be noted is the brickwork that is done exquisitively, like the best works of the School of Amsterdam. Very interesting works, these incinerators. I wonder if there is a book. Maybe there is. There are already, all books are already published, on the incinerators of Walter Burley Griffin. It could have been a temple, some kind of a religious building. And we'll read a little bit later that actually he was influenced by anthroposophy and maybe via his wife. So there are elements of spirituality related to particularly this series of incinerators. It's an abandoned building, as we can see. Now, I will read a little bit about this because I thought it is important. The initial reverbatory furnaces, meaning the incinerators built, anyway, their names are there, were relatively small structures and church-like or large residence-like in appearance and scale. Now, to make an industrial building look like a church, it's rather unusual, no? Later, Griffin and Nichols, this was the office, he worked together with this person, Nichols, incinerators took on a more monumental and imposing countenance, utilizing Art Deco styles and pre-Columbian motifs in those particular incinerators from Willoughby, Glebe, and Piermont or Pyrmont. Simon Reeves argues that the catalyst for change was the growing interest of Walter, and especially Marion, his wife, in the spiritual beliefs of anthroposophy, describing the Piermont incinerator as representing the geometric massing of archaic power embellished with symbols. I guess there is a book or an article called Incineration and Incantations. A nice title. From the early 1930s, anthroposophical belief did appear to inform Walter Burley Griffin's architecture and planning. The American Anthroposophical Society affirms that buildings should be ecologically sound and reflect the character of the region or culture and should enhance it. Physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being should enhance physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being. To this end, Griffin's work certainly possessed a crucial ecological purpose. This is interesting, I would say, and I wonder if we are inspired in our projects today by such matters. And perhaps we should. Maybe we should read, Steiner's work on anthroposophy and, animate our buildings with spirit, because I think we totally despiritualized architecture. And that's not a good thing, I think. But there was another text. I'm a little bit confused. I know maybe it's later. Very strange. I had another, I don't understand. Anyway, we already know that apparently his wife had an influence on him. They both were attracted by anthroposophy, and apparently anthroposophy had an effect on, the way they crystallized those projects, particularly for the incinerators. But I mad at myself because it was a short fragment where it was stressed the importance of fire you know, the symbolic, metaphorical, mythical even force of fire. And it's gone now, and I don't understand why, because it was, unless it was misplaced in the presentation. We'll continue. Now, this is a tall building in Melbourne, Leonard House. It's not a private house, of course. It's I don't know, maybe an office building or an apartment building. But look at the front elevation. Is I would say rather remarkable. And it's also remarkable because he didn't say no to ornament. It's clearly ornamental. I still have the text because I remember I didn't yet arrive at other incinerators, and I hope they are here in this presentation. Otherwise, I will not forgive myself. Walter Burley Griffin and his wife, Marion Mahoney Griffin. His own house, I mean their own house in Australia, built with stones. I like it, you know, it's rather modest, but I don't know, it has this, you know, in a way it connects with what some people like to think about these days, primitive futures. You know, it's a prismatic cave in a way. Not bad. Their own house, Fishwick House. Uh, Apparently, Griffin purchased a large plot of land together with some other investors, and he intended to build a colony, and he built, I don't know, I think 16 houses there before he died, but he planned to build more than just that. Some of them are still standing, and I understood the prices went up because his fame went up and so on. Another house, so very different from the domestic architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. You wouldn't even say he worked with Frank Lloyd Wright unless you consider the deeply felt love for nature, which can be seen here. And nature in Australia is, you know, wilder than in some other parts of the world. It didn't yet, the humans didn't yet have the time to totally subdue it. A rendering, I don't know if it was done by him or his wife, or it's just someone, maybe that John Naycraft. This is how the house was supposed to look like, seen from, you know, a certain point of view. I particularly like this picture of it. You know, the stones and bricks, they belong themselves to nature, and as such, they collaborate, you know, in very affectionate terms with trees, with grass, with bushes, and so on. Chong House. This is a newer house. Well, new. It was the end of the presentation, but I'm still alarmed. Something happened here. I don't understand. Some information disappeared, and I don't understand. I don't understand how this was possible. This is how some of these houses, the pictures you see are from the present. But here it seems to be invaded by nature. Maybe it was abandoned at one point. Now, a project for an opera house in Sydney, Australia, and you are going to see two renderings by his wife, Marion Mahoney Griffin. This is one of them, and you wouldn't expect an opera building to look like this. Here is another rendering. At first, when I saw this drawing, I thought they were, row houses, like I would not have expected this to be an opera building because of its multiplicity of, repeated elements. But it's rather modernistic, and I still think Marion Griffin did a great job in her rendering. I see here a peculiarity that Frank Lloyd Wright also used, and I comment on it because to me it seems significant. In Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings, also very often he limits the amount of sky, so to speak, in the drawing. You see, the Earth is not limited by this framing line, but he does it, where you wouldn't expect it to be, because the sky is supposed to be infinite. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know exactly why this happened in the drawings of Frank Lloyd Wright. Maybe in the case of Frank Lloyd Wright, because as you know, Frank Lloyd Wright advocated a horizontal architecture that grew from the earth and belonged to the earth, not to the sky. I don't know. I mean, this is a drawing by Marion Griffin, and it's possible that working for a number of years for Frank Lloyd Wright influenced both of them. Another drawing, but this one is difficult to read. Sorry for another house. The Rampart House. It's another house where there is some influence, some echoes of Frank Lloyd Wright, but this belongs to Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin. Now the house in Evanston, I'm afraid, I don't know, I'm really agitated because I included many pictures which I didn't see here. And I don't understand how they disappear. A house in Evanston, this is the house I pass by almost daily on my bicycle. And I thought it belonged to Frank Lloyd Wright because it's very much in the prairie style and it's excellent. It is almost a jewel, but it's actually by Griffin. Is this one. Not bad, not bad at all. Evanston is a suburb of Chicago. What separates Evanston from Chicago is a street. On one side of the street is Chicago, and on the other side of the street is Evanston. There is an important university here, Northwestern University, and there are some remarkable buildings. It's a rather well-to-do suburb. This house is truly, if it belonged to Frank Lloyd Wright, it would have been one of his masterpieces. But it was built by Griffin. But here the influence of Frank Lloyd Wright is obvious. He almost did a better job than the master himself. Simulating, of course, the inventions of Frank Lloyd Wright. So he built this before they went to Australia, rather young. Now I have to, you must forgive me, I have to understand what happened here. I have another presentation on this subject and I cannot accept that I work hard today in order to add that information and I see it's gone now. So just a second, please.